Krishna. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming this evening. I'm happy to be here with you. I've been coming to Hong Kong over the last few years, and usually I've been coming in the autumn time, but by circumstances, this time I came this time of year. I was just in India for 3.5 months, and every time I go to India, I think, where am I? Because so much changes from year to year. The first time I went to India was 1978. Ancient times. The way things were in India in 1978 were a bit different from how they are now. Would you agree? Yeah. Whether they're good, whether they are better now or worse now, that is a question. But I can say for one thing, I was in Vrindavan, and I was staying close to the Krishna Balaram temple, our ISKCON temple, which is a wonderful temple. It's always so many people come. They call it the Anreji Mandir. Anreji. They call it the Anreji Mandir, the locals. But one thing I noticed this time, I was there for 10 days, and during these 10 days, unlike in 1978 and some years after that, I did not hear one peacock. You used to hear the peacocks in the nearby forest, Ramanreti. Now you hear no peacocks. And why is that? Because everything's been built up. And now Vrindavan is becoming something like a suburb of Delhi. There's Noida, there's Gurgaon, and there's Vrindavan. Everything built up. Well, yes, I have mixed feelings about this because the Vrindavan I knew when I first came is so much changed, and on the other side, it's nice. So many people are coming to Vrindavan. Anyway. So, let's discuss a bit Śrīmad Bhagavad-gita. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So we're reading from Śrīmad Bhagavad-gita, which Srila Prabhupada's translations and purports his book he called Bhagavad-gita as it is. And we're reading from Chapter 3, called Karma Yoga. Each of the 18 chapters of Bhagavad-gita have traditionally a yoga title. Does anyone know what the title of the first chapter of Bhagavad-gita is? The yoga title.
Vishad.
Arjuna Vishada Yoga. Very good. Yes. Arjuna Vishada Yoga. What means Vishada? Vishada can mean lamentation. It can mean this confusion, it can mean such things. So you may ask, how is it possible that this is a yoga? How is it that confusion and distress and disappointment can be yoga? How is that possible? It is yoga because Arjuna, representing all of us, he's confessing his position. He's being honest about his situation in the world. And thus he's being authentic. He's not saying, I'm okay, you're okay. He's saying, no, I'm not okay. And I need your help. He's approaching Krishna. And because of that honesty, that becomes yoga. We become connected. Yoga means connection. So we become connected through Arjuna's earnestness to listen to Krishna. And then the rest of the remaining 17 chapters are all also yogas. And one of them, chapter 3, is karma yoga. All of these chapters are referred to as samvada. What means samvada?
Summary.
Conversation, discussion. Yes. This is a conversation, it's a discussion. And the conversation continues. We are participating today in Krishna's conversation, Krishna's dialogue. So we're listening to Krishna, and this, of course, is important to keep in mind that these are Krishna's words. So we can chant the verse together. Indriyasyendriyasyārthe, indriyasyendriyasyārthe, rāga-dveṣau vyavasthitau, rāga-dveṣau vyavasthitau, tayor vaśam āgacchet, tayor vaśam āgacchet, tayoḥ paripanthinau, paripanthinau, indriyasyendriyasyārthe, rāga-dveṣau vyavasthitau, tayor vaśam āgacchet, tayoḥ paripanthinau. Others? Want to try?
Indriyasyendriyasyārthe, rāga-dveṣau tayor vaśam āgacchet, tayoḥ paripanthinau.
Any of the gents?
indriyasyendriyasyārthe, rāga-dveṣau vyavasthitau, tayor vaśam āgacchet, tayoḥ asya paripanthinau.
Indriyasyendriyasyārthe, rāga-dveṣau
reveals. Or, as you say, no, as they say in Putonghua, hanhao. Okay. What does it mean? Indriyasya of the senses. Indriyasyārthe in the sense objects. Rāga, attachment. Dveṣau, also detachment. Vyavasthitau, put under regulations. Tayor, of them. Never. Vaśam, control. Āgacchet, one should come. Tayoḥ, goes. He, certainly. Asya, his. Paripanthinau, stumbling blocks. Actually, the word paripanthinau means like highway robber. You know, highway robbers. A robber, someone who steals things on the highway. Anyway. Okay, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhagavad-gita Swami, Srila Prabhupada. Translation: there are principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of such attachment or aversion, because they are stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. Purport. Those who are in Krishna consciousness are naturally reluctant to engage in material sense gratification. But those who are not in such consciousness should follow the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures. Unrestricted sense enjoyment is the cause of material engagement. Like in this park up here, what is it? Kowloon Park. They have these big cages with birds, big parrots and so on. So being in a cage. It's interesting, in Vrindavan, many people, they build their house or their apartment in such a way, because there's so many monkeys, so they'll build like a cage around their balcony or around the whole house. And so it's a kind of irony that people put themselves into a cage and all the monkeys are outside looking in. So instead of people looking in an animal cage, it's animals. Anyway. Unrestricted sense enjoyment is the cause of material engagement, but one who follows the rules and regulations of the revealed scriptures does not become entangled by the sense objects. For example, sex enjoyment is a necessity for the conditioned soul, and sex enjoyment is allowed under the license of marriage ties. According to scriptural injunctions, one is forbidden to engage in sex relationships with any woman other than one's wife. All other women are to be considered as one's mother. But in spite of such injunctions, a man is still inclined to have sex relationships with other women. These propensities are to be curbed. Otherwise, they will be stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. As long as the material body is there, the necessities of the material body are allowed, but under rules and regulations. And yet, we should not rely upon the control of such allowances. One has to follow these rules and regulations unattached to them, because practice of sense gratification under regulations may also lead one to go astray. As much as there's always the chance of an accident, even on the royal roads. Although they may be very carefully maintained, no one can guarantee that there will be no danger even on the safest road. The sense enjoyment spirit has been current a very long time. No, a very long, long time. Owing to material association. Therefore, in spite of regulated sense enjoyment, there is every chance of falling down. Therefore, any attachment for regulated sense enjoyment must also be avoided by all means. But attachment to Krishna consciousness, or acting always in the loving service of Krishna, detaches one from all kinds of sensory activities. Therefore, no one should try to be detached from Krishna consciousness at any stage of life. The whole purpose of detachment from all kinds of sense enjoyment is ultimately to become situated on the platform of Krishna consciousness. And so ends Prabhupada's purport to this verse, and I'll try to say something further about it. Indriyasyendriyasyārthe, rāga-dveṣau, vyavasthitau, tayor vaśam āgacchet, paripanthinau. There are principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of such attachment and aversion, because they're stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. This verse is really an elaboration on the previous verse, which maybe you discussed last week, but to remind you, I'll read it. Even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows the nature he has acquired from the three modes, the three gunas. What can repression accomplish? More broadly, what is Krishna talking about in this part of the Gita? He's talking about regulation, of course, and he's speaking about regulation according to him. He's giving the regulation, and he's suggesting that it's a good idea if we follow his direction. At the same time, Krishna's being very realistic. Krishna is not in a fantasy world. That's good news, because being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, full of eternity, full of knowledge and full of bliss, He understands our situation, He understands our conditioning. There are two terms that are sometimes used with regard to conditioning. One is vasana, and the other is samskara. The word samskara has the sense of imprint. Sometimes the word is used in books for a book printing. First, pratama samskara, like that. So we get imprints in our consciousness. How do we get these imprints? We get them from our experiences, from the outside world, and in particular we get them from our actions in the world, the actions of our active senses. And these impressions stay with us, and they carry with us. And so we see the world each in our own way. We perceive only what our collection of impressions allow us to see. There's so much going on in the world that we don't even notice. And yet we have, in a sense, like horses, we have blinders on. You have seen, perhaps, horses so that they don't get distracted. They'll put these blinders on. I've even seen horses in Sweden where the horses are not being engaged, they cover their eyes completely. So this conditioning, vasana or samskara, Krishna recognizes. Yes, I know, he says, you are conditioned. And yes, I know, he says, you are conditioned in terms of these three modes of nature. And yes, I know that your inclination is going to be to act according to these modes. I know that's the case. And my job, Krishna is saying in effect, is to help you. He's speaking to all of us. I want to help you to get you out of this conditioning. I want to offer you a permanent solution to your problem. So he's recognizing there's a problem, and he's affirming there is a solution, and he's empowering us to go for the solution. He's empowering us to go for the solution. It's interesting if you read Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7. Who has read Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7?
Don't remember.
Canto 7 is a very memorable canto. It's the first 10 chapters are telling of the pastimes, the story of Prahlad Maharaj and his confrontations, if you like, with his dear father, Hiranyakashipu, and the eventual appearance of Lord Nrsimhadev, right? And commentators explain that these first 10 chapters of the 7th canto have a specific purpose, and that specific purpose is to show us an example of a devotee who is completely pure, namely Prahlad. And we see, if you study that those chapters, you'll see what an amazing figure Prahlad is. He's absolutely free from envy. His father is torturing him. He's giving him nothing but trouble. But still, at the end, after Nrsimhadev comes and he kills Hiranyakashipu in this very special way, what does Prahlad do? He prays, my dear Lord, please reinstate my father in his spiritual abode. So he doesn't hold any grudge. You know this word grudge? Our tendency in this world is to hold grudges. Someone does something, somebody says something to us that we don't like. Then what do? We hold on to a grudge against that person. Who does that grudge harm the most?
Who is holding?
The one who's holding it. That's right. It's like you're holding onto a knife. You're holding onto the knife blade, and you're cutting yourself. So that's what we're doing. Prahlad was completely free from that. Okay, so, but then, what is the remainder of the 7th canto about? There are 5 more chapters in the 7th canto. And they're describing the rules and regulations of varna and ashrama dharma. Now, the rules and regulations of varna and ashrama dharma, who are they for? They're not for people like Prahlad. Prahlad doesn't need any of that. He's completely liberated. He has taken full shelter of the Lord. So the question could come, why is it that after describing the pure devotee, then it's going back and talking about all the rules and regulations for those who are not pure devotees? Why? Isn't this kind of going backwards? What's going on? Well, one way of understanding this is when we say pure devotee, we think of anything pure. We may think of a pure element, pure air, or maybe we don't have much experience of pure air in Hong Kong or in Delhi, I have to say. Anyway, don't get me started. Or pure water. What is pure water? How would we describe pure water?
It should be
Free from contamination.
may not be.
Yeah, you can speak in a negative state, that which has no contamination, but that you could say about pure anything, right? What is pure water?
Direct from river. Just take from river direct.
Taken from river?
Because
Nowadays, I don't think you'll find pure water
Ganga
in
is so dirty,
much of any river.
you go and take water from there, next day you run away from there. Ganga and Yamuna is so dirty now.
But we can say that pure water, we can give a chemist's answer, right? It consists of, 2 parts of hydrogen, 1 part of oxygen. That's what they tell us. Okay, that's very nice. But who has experience of that? We may have some idea what pure water is, but do you actually have experience of that? Probably not. There's always going to be something mixed into the water. So we are in a condition of not having that experience, and therefore, again, going back to 7th canto of Bhagavad-gita, we get a progression of activities, of processes, of dharma. And what means dharma? That which sustains, that which holds, that which upholds. Dharma is that which upholds human society. So all of the regulations that are there. But what are all these regulations getting at? What's the whole idea of them? What's the problem that they're addressing? The problem is what Krishna is speaking about in this verse. So the problem is we have these bodies which have senses, and guess what? When there are senses, the senses are going to be connected to sense objects. And what happens when senses get connected to sense objects? There can be problems. Later in the Gita, I think it's in this chapter or in the next chapter, Krishna gives a very nice explanation. Indriyani paranyahur indriyat paramana manasastu param budhe yo budhe paratastu sa. He says there's a hierarchy. And if we understand the hierarchy, we're doing very well. What's the hierarchy? On the bottom of this hierarchy are the objects of the senses. All the things that we can perceive with our senses, they're on the bottom. Above those sense objects are the senses. Above the senses is the mind, manas. And above the mind is the intelligence, the buddhi. Yo buddhe paratastu saha. he, the Atman, is above the intelligence. So liberation means simply to understand and act on that basis. That instead of being controlled by the sense objects, we want to be controlled by the self, by the Atman, which is controlled in turn by Paramatma. And who is Paramatma? Krishna. And Krishna is speaking here. Yeah. We have another interesting example in the Bhagavatam of a devotee who some have observed kind of represent the ideal of this chapter of Bhagavad-gita, namely Bhishma. Now, you all know from Mahabharata who is Bhishma. What is so special about Bhishma? Well, we all know that as a young man, when his father took a liking to one young woman as a second wife, in order to facilitate his marriage to her, to Satyavati, Bhishma volunteered to not marry and to remain celibate for the rest of his life. And when the demigods heard his vow, what did the demigods say from above when they heard this incredible vow of Bhishma? They said, Bhishma! Bhishma! They were shocked. It's an expression of amazement. Shock. Otherwise, he was known as Devavrata, which of course means divine vow. In any case, he makes this vow, and later he makes another vow. Now, both of these vows, as it turns out, are going to cause problems. On the one hand, it's very nice. We can say Bhishma is a great personality, great hero, because of his selflessness. He becomes selfless. He says, my dear father, go marry as you wish, and your offspring from that marriage, let them take the kingdom. But what happens? Bhishma ends up having to manage the kingdom over 2 generations because of dysfunctionality in the family. But his refusal to bear children himself becomes the source of the problems of the continuity of the family. So his selflessness seems all very nice, but there's a problem. He causes a problem in the family. Later on, he makes another vow, a very interesting vow. Because Bhishma is so powerful, no one can defeat him. In the first days of the battle, the Kura-Kshetra battle, he is slaying, he is killing soldiers left and right by the thousands. And the Pandavas are very distraught what to do in this situation. And finally, at one point, they, in the evening, because that was the time that the fighting would stop, unlike modern warfare, and you could actually go and intermingle with your enemy, they went and they asked Bhishma, Bhishma, how can we defeat you? And Bhishma, being a great personality, being honest, he said, I'll tell you how you can defeat me. He said, I have made a vow. And the vow is that I will never fight a woman or someone who has been a woman in the past. Bling! Krishna and Arjuna understood now what to do. And so on the next day, as you may know, they bring out Shikandin. And Shikandin in the previous life, and actually in her early life, in that life, was a woman. This was previously Ambika, who had made a vow herself that she's going to kill Bhishma. Why? Because Bhishma had refused to marry her. So we get this series of vows as a result of a vow of selflessness. But now Bhishma has vowed that he will not fight against a woman or someone who's been a woman. What does this mean for him? This means his death. Of course, it's not going to be immediate death because it's Bhishma, and that benediction he has that he can choose the time of his death. Arjuna is going, because Shikandin is going to be there, present, he's going to drop his weapons. Bhishma will drop his weapons. Arjuna will shoot, I think it says 25 arrows. He makes Bhishma into a kind of pin cushion. And then Bhishma falls. Now, one interesting detail here is that this news that Bhishma falls comes to Dhritarashtra before the Bhagavad-gita is spoken. Before the war has started, the war has already started. What? Yes. That's very strange. After Arjuna has reassured Yudhishthira, we are going to win this war, later he's going to drop his weapons and say, I'm not going to fight. But before this, before Dhritarashtra asks Sanjaya to tell him what's happening on the battlefield, the news comes that Bhishma has fallen. So it's a kind of advance notice of what is going to happen, and therefore, when you read the first chapter of Bhagavad-gita, then it makes sense why Duryodhana, because there's an irony. Duryodhana is speaking about our army and how powerful our army is, but you sense that he's not really so confident. In any case, Bhishma is this selfless person, which seems to be what the Bhagavad-gita chapter 3 is, so to say, preaching for us to be. We should be selfless. We should act without desire for results. We should work for the sake of the work, for the service, for the seva. All of these shoulds are there. And at the same time, Krishna is saying, look, I know the reality. I know that you are attached. I know that you are bound by the modes of material nature. But Krishna is saying, I'm not giving up on you. I'm not giving up on you because I know you have the power of choice. At the end of the Gita, Krishna is going to tell Arjuna, Matchita sarva durgani matprasada tarishyasi. He's going to say that by my mercy, you will be able to cross over all obstacles. Matprasada tarishyasi. But then he says, āgacchet ahankaram nashoshasi vinanshasi. If you act in false ego, ahankaram, then you'll be destroyed. So he gives a choice, but then he says, if you make the wrong choice, I'm sorry for you, because you're going to suffer. you're going to suffer for making the wrong choice. But you can make the choice. We are approaching very soon the appearance day of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. I'm going to be not in Hong Kong at the time, but I wish you all a wonderful celebration. I'll just end with a nice prayer that has been composed offering respect to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and it's expressing the mood of someone who feels he or she has really fully received the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and therefore is free from the binding that drives us in material existence. Kaivalyam narakayate tridasapur āgacchet pushpayate durdam tendriyakala sarta patali protkatadam strayate vishvam purna sukayate vidimahendras chakitayate yat karunya katakshavaiva vavatam tam goramevastama. He says, for someone who has seen the glance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who has received the merciful glance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Kaivalyam narakayate, Kaivalya, liberation, what everyone hopes for, he considers it to be just hell. Kaivalyam narakayate tridasapura kasha pushpayate, and the akasha pushpa, the heavenly realm, he considers to be just like so many sky flowers. It's just imagination. It's not valuable. It's not important. Durdam tendriya kala sarpa patali protkadadam strayate. The senses, which normally are dangerous in the same way as the fangs of a poisonous snake are dangerous, are for someone who has received the mercy of Sri Chaitanya, they're like the broken fangs. They're no longer dangerous. Vishvam purna sukayate, and the whole world is full of happiness for such a devotee. Vidi Mahendras Chakitayate, and he considers the place of Mahendra to be like a place for insects. Yat karunya katakshavaiva vavatam tam goramevastama. Such a merciful Lord, I offer my prayers to. So we can begin to anticipate Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance. I recommend by reading Chaitanya Charitamrita. You know this book? No. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, in its original edition, 17 volumes. It's been made into less volumes, thicker volumes. Don't be deterred by the size, but just read some verses of Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teaches us to do what? To chant the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And I think that's what we're going to do now. But before we do that, I've been asked to let you know that there is now a special possibility, opportunity to make considerable contributions toward the construction of the Sri Mayapur Chandrodaya Mandir Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. There are these cards, and if you are interested to contribute, you can ask to get such a card where you mark off which of the categories you want to be a member of. You can be a donor member, a patron member, or a trustee member, depending on the amount. All of these amounts are rather substantial, but yes, you may yourselves be in a position to offer such quantity, or you may know someone who has this facility, this possibility. The temple is there, it's coming up, it's becoming a reality. They have just installed the middle chakra, and now all 3 chakras are installed just a couple of weeks ago. When the chakra is there, that means it's happening. And now you can say it's all details. But these are substantial details to be worked on within, especially the interior, but also exterior. Who has been to Mayapur recently? Tom and Devarishi. If you're thinking, I would like to go to Mayapur sometime, but I'm not quite sure when to go, the best time in terms of weather, as you may know, is in the autumn or in the early spring. And if you want to go for the official opening of the Temple of Vedic Planetarium, they're telling us now it will be the year 2022. So you can book your tickets, make your reservations today. Right. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad-gita ki jai. Ananta Gopti Vaishnavarinda ki jai. Shri Guru Bhagavad ki jai. Gaur Premanande.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Let us all now approach Lord Krishna, speak our minds, our hearts to Him by chanting 1 round of japa, calling out to the Lord. Leading it'll be led by Krishna-ksetra Maharaj. Please, let us all chant together.
We can begin by chanting the Panchatattva mantra, the 5 truths of Sri Chaitanya, Sri Nityananda Prabhu, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Nityananda Prabhu, Sri Advaita Acharya, Sri Gadadhar Pandit, and Srivas Thakur. And then the Mahamantra. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna
Hare Krishna
Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare